Whenever an individual behaves insolently toward you, a critical crossroad presents itself immediately. You can choose to lash out, confirming their worst assumptions, or you can remain completely unshaken and establish permanent authority. Throughout my past decades steering multiple high-growth enterprises, I have navigated thousands of intense professional discussions that hammered this reality home. Truly admired leaders are not magical figures who live completely insulated from hostility or social testing. Rather, they experience the exact same friction as everyone else, but they possess the rare ability to remain totally relaxed when the emotional temperature rises. Today, I want to break down 5 tactical maneuvers I use to preserve my professional dignity without ever begging for it. The initial strategy centers around the strategic hesitation. The absolute worst blunder you can commit when someone crosses a line is giving an instant emotional reaction. I distinctly recall an incident from roughly 4 years ago. I was riding in an elevator alongside a junior staff member from our content division. This young man, who was only 19 at the time, suddenly delivered a highly passive-aggressive insult directly at me. The statement was incredibly bizarre, creating an instant drop in air pressure that everyone in the elevator could visibly feel. In that exact second, I realized a monumental choice lay before me. My younger self would have instantly pushed back with a fiery display of dominance to force compliance. Instead, I chose absolute stillness. I inhaled quietly, locked my eyes onto his, and refused to utter a single syllable. My silent gaze communicated everything necessary. Within 30 minutes, he knocked on my door, completely filled with regret, admitting his behavior was entirely inappropriate. My complete refusal to engage forced him to realize how wildly out of bounds his comment actually was. Interestingly, I never had to explain the mechanics of why his words were insulting. I did not have to lower myself to argue or defend my positioning. Instead, I maintained steady eye contact, kept my facial expression completely blank, and let the quiet do the heavy lifting. By refusing to speak, you force the other person to confront their own actions. A fascinating study from Harvard Business School regarding high-stakes negotiations revealed that the specific party who breaks a silent window first invariably gives up massive leverage or reveals too much information. Why does this phenomenon occur? Because empty air creates intense psychological friction, but that friction only builds against the person who initiated the conflict. What completely destroys this tactical hesitation? Breaking your gaze, staring at the floor, fidgeting with your hands, or letting out a nervous chuckle. Doing any of these things signals that you are crumbling under the weight of the moment. If you rush to fill the void with random words just to alleviate your own anxiety, you lose. Instead, you must lean directly into the awkwardness. Once you master the ability to tolerate that brief social discomfort, the pressure shifts entirely to the antagonist. This allows you to draw a hard line without turning the interaction into a toxic war. This approach is absolutely essential when your objective is preserving a long-term professional alliance while firmly establishing a boundary. Therefore, the very next time someone hurls a disrespectful comment your way, try doing absolutely nothing. Quietly count to 3 in your mind. Maintain a totally neutral expression, lock your eyes forward, and let the silence work. In the vast majority of social interactions, when you clearly signal that a boundary has been crossed without throwing a tantrum, people will rapidly backpedal and offer an apology. You do not need to raise your voice, launch into an attack, or shout about how awful they are. You merely need to demonstrate that their behavior failed to move you, and the environment will naturally self-correct. I highly recommend practicing this in low-stakes environments first. Perhaps a colleague interrupts you during a basic team sync, or a client behaves a bit curtly over a brief phone call. Running these low-risk drills ensures that when a massive personal conflict or multi-million-dollar deal hangs in the balance, your nervous system will already be fully conditioned to execute the play. The second mechanism is advanced verbal mirroring. Back when I was 19, I was in a relationship with someone who constantly questioned my integrity. He routinely hurled accusations, demanding to know why I was out late or assuming I was being unfaithful. It was deeply frustrating because I am an incredibly loyal partner. One evening, we were gathered in a room packed with mutual friends. Right there in public, he openly accused me of deception. I looked straight at him and calmly stated, "So, what you are asserting is that because I do not answer your messages within 5 minutes while catching up with my friends, I am actively violating your trust." The entire room fell into an immediate, stunned silence. I refused to debate him, and I refused to defend myself. I simply threw his own logical premise right back into his lap. Hearing his implicit accusations stated out loud made him realize how utterly ridiculous his position was. Most individuals do not actually comprehend how malicious they sound until their own words are echoed back to them with absolute clarity. Mirroring triggers instant self-awareness without requiring you to go on a hostile offensive. You simply repeat their exact premise back to them in the form of a calm question. You are not fighting, you are merely serving as a clean mirror. When people act out of raw emotion, they frequently lose control of the connection between their internal thoughts and external speech. Serving their words back to them halts an escalation immediately. However, your execution hinges entirely on your vocal tone. Avoid delivering the mirror with a sarcastic, mocking cadence. If you sound like you are mocking them, it becomes an open declaration of war. But if you present it with flat, objective curiosity, you completely shift the burden of proof back to them. You are demonstrating a desire to clarify, not to fight. Our third framework is the narrative redirect. When an individual targets you with disrespect, they are attempting to drag you into an arena where they control the parameters. For instance, during a corporate alignment meeting a couple of years ago, a team lead openly insulted a colleague by calling them unintelligent right in front of the group. The atmosphere grew incredibly tense. In that fraction of a second, I knew my leadership response would establish the cultural standard for the entire room. I looked directly at the individual and said, "Acknowledged. We are not utilizing that style of communication today. Here is the actual problem we are solving instead." I immediately pushed the agenda forward. I denied his toxic remark any additional oxygen. My sole focus was shifting the group's attention back to productive work. True to form, that exact individual approached me privately after the session to apologize profusely. He could tell by my smooth, unbothered redirection that his behavior was completely unacceptable. Did I need to escalate the situation by screaming or calling him names? Absolutely not. By executing a clean pivot, you leave the antagonist completely isolated in their game. When no one joins in, they look incredibly foolish. Is it satisfying to verbally dismantle someone in the moment? Of course it is. We all possess that aggressive impulse deep down inside, but long-term effectiveness must always override short-term emotional gratification. Acclaimed strategist Robert Greene writes extensively about how the individual who dictates the framework of a conversation ultimately commands the outcome. Disrespect is simply an attempt to force you into a defensive posture. A clean redirect is a complete structural reset. It signals that the interaction will proceed exclusively on your terms. If your counter-response is icy or dismissive, you risk escalating the conflict. Your posture must remain completely professional, firm, and forward-looking. The fourth tactical pillar is the clean exit. On certain occasions, the single most powerful move available to you is simply walking out of the room. Nearly a decade ago, my business partner and I were on an introductory conference call with a potential enterprise collaborator alongside my executive assistant. I posed a highly strategic operational question to this prospective partner. He condescendingly chuckled and said, "I am terribly sorry, dear, but are you just the secretary?" I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I calmly responded, "No, I am actually the Chief Executive Officer and majority founder, and I am concluding my participation on this call right now." Then I hung up. I did not scream, I did not launch into an explicit tirade, and I did not sit around waiting for him to backpedal. I simply refused to give my valuable time to someone who viewed me as lesser. The absolute second you begin pleading with someone to recognize your value, you have fundamentally lost the battle. Demanding basic decency is entirely beneath your stature. Walking away communicates an unshakable truth. Your presence is a privilege, and you are entirely unavailable for anything less than absolute professionalism. Your physical movements will always speak exponentially louder than your spoken words. People do not alter their behavior because you gave them a stern lecture or screamed at them. They adapt when your actions create real, undeniable consequences. By removing your presence, you instantly shift the dynamic. However, you must ensure your exit is handled with pure dignity, not as a manipulative emotional punishment. If you storm out during a domestic dispute and refuse to state when you will return, you are simply trying to inflict pain. That is a toxic reaction, not a position of strength. Even during intense disagreements with my spouse, I explicitly state, "I am taking a 20-minute walk to clear my head, and I will be back to resolve this." I am incredibly passionate about these methodologies because they teach you how to exercise massive social influence without ever lowering your standard. Anyone can scream. Even a toddler can throw a tantrum. True maturity means navigating conflict with elite composure, grace, and self-respect. When you match toxicity with toxicity, you instantly degrade your own character to match theirs. Ask yourself right now, is there a specific environment where you are actively tolerating poor treatment because you believe you absolutely need the revenue, the status, or the safety? What is that endurance truly costing your psyche? Is it eroding your core confidence and personal pride? You can elegantly disengage by stating, I am not participating in this specific dialogue right now, or I am stepping away for a moment to process this. Inserting a physical buffer of time forces the other party to sit face to face with their own choices. Most toxic outbursts are driven by a highly volatile connection between thought and action. By forcing a temporal delay into the equation, you give their logical mind an opportunity to regain control. This leads directly into our fifth and final mechanism, the intentional delayed response. While delivering an instant counterpunch feels incredibly satisfying, it represents incredibly short-sighted thinking. True authority is built on long-term positioning. During the introductory year of our investment firm, an individual made a highly inappropriate, unprofessional joke during a massive boardroom meeting with 20 executives present. The room instantly froze. I was absolutely furious. My immediate instinct was to tear into him right then and there. However, I recognized that if I addressed the insult publicly, the entire strategy session would derail into a massive emotional sideshow. I looked directly at him and stated with total composure, "We will address that specific comment thoroughly once this meeting concludes." My entire executive team then watched me seamlessly pivot back to leading a highly complex 2-hour operational sync without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, that individual had to sit in that room for 120 minutes, completely stewing in the realization of his blunder. By the time we met privately, the entire power dynamic had completely inverted. He was completely disarmed, not because of a fiery speech I gave, but because time had forced him to stew in his own error. Delaying your response allows you to collect your thoughts so you can execute cleanly instead of burning down the room. Throughout my entire career, I have observed that highly reactive professionals rapidly bleed market credibility. If your goal is to command genuine authority, you must learn to distinguish between moments that require immediate confrontation and moments where immediate engagement completely destroys your leverage. If you struggle to execute this under pressure, it is simply because you lack a pre-engineered playbook. You do not have the precise words mapped out in advance. Find a solid phrase that resonates with your authentic style, such as, "That specific remark does not align with me. Let us unpack it later." Having a go-to script removes the cognitive load when an ambush occurs. The ultimate takeaway is this: respect is never a random gift that individuals choose to hand over to you out of the goodness of their hearts. It is a structured behavioral code that you actively train people to follow based entirely on how you react to their initial transgressions. The exact second someone tests your boundaries is your ultimate teaching window. In that tiny 10-second window, you are loudly broadcasting a message. You are either teaching them that you accept poor treatment, that you are easily rattled into an emotional counterattack, or that you are entirely unavailable for disrespect. Rehearsing these precise scripts before the conflict occurs is how you protect your peace. I am not trying to transform you into an icy, unapproachable machine. I am trying to hand you an elite professional standard that you can enforce with absolute kindness and unbreakable strength. If you got value from this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Layla Leads. Consistency is what alters your reality over time. Enforce your standard every single time.